and that's going to be really fun to watch very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually going to be on round 2, which will be on Marooner's Bay, and this map is it's very challenging compared to the other maps due to the fact that the bosses spawn further away from the basket than most other maps.
Okay. Curios. I'm guessing the team is named Curios. I don't see them on our team roster here, so I'm guessing they have just entered the Salmon Run tournament, which is great. There are a lot of teams who chose to just play in this, and I think if that was your choice, then they're probably going to be pretty good.
Absolutely. There are many dedicated Salmon Run players out there, and those players have very much developed. You might want to call it Salmon Run metagame, but it's more so that they develop very many different resources to help different players on the different strategies of the game. In Salmon Run, compared to a player versus player game, so in like a normal rank match, all the opponents, the opponents are decently predictable. It's all computer based or AI based, which however you want to call it. So it becomes much easier to develop different strategies. Although there are different situations that could arise, such as different events and different kinds of bosses that spawn, but especially when you're allowed to pick your weapons, you can plan for this.
Yeah. I think you can almost say that it's kind of like fine art of Splatoon, because you have to know all of these different details so much more than when you're playing a regular game. Like, we have so many map and mode combinations that you have to learn all of those when you're playing a standard tournament. But in this, you also have to know all of the enemies, how much HP they have, how many hits each weapon can deal before they take them, what, like you mentioned, where the bosses spawn on specific maps, how you can get around those the fastest, how you can pick up eggs and get them to the basket before the timer runs out. So there's a lot of different details that you have to have memorized, and when things can be really random, you have to know it all.
Yeah, there's a ton of knowledge that goes into Salmon Run, and even if people wanted to go into more complex tactics, such as when you're going for high scores, it's much different than when you're playing casually. So you have to know where to take down bosses, when to make sure they go close to the basket, and make sure to take them out early so that you can run the eggs. Because one of the older strategies was to always lure bosses towards the basket so you can make it easy for eggs to be deposited. But once you're going for high scores, you're not always going to have that luxury, because especially at higher difficulties, bosses will spawn much faster, and that might give you a huge deficit, or rather a big challenge to take out 70 different enemies at once.
Yeah. I could definitely see how that would be a problem. So you have to, we were talking a little bit about this while we were waiting for everything to be ironed out. And do you think if you have all of the bosses, which we had kind of gone through, and they're sort of 6, right? Major ones?
Yeah, around 6 or around 7.
7, yeah, because, I missed Drizzler there. So if you have all 7 of them within a game, what's your priority? Which are the ones that you want to take out first? Which are the ones that you want to be the most worried about when they come on the map?
I would say the biggest one is the Stinger, because this is one of the bosses that do not approach anyone. They sit at the very edge of the map and have infinite range. Stinger, which, especially in multiples, will cause you a ton of trouble if they are not dealt with.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like that would definitely be the one that you would want to make sure that you can get out the fastest. I know also Flyfish, you had mentioned, had once been kind of the strategy to take out one of the sides so that it wasn't launching double missiles over and over again.
That is absolutely one of the strategies that can be used. Although when you're going for high score, there is a time when taking it out as quick as possible is the best option, especially when it's one of the first few that spawns, when there are very few enemies to deal with, and you are easily able to take them out and deposit the eggs before you have to deal with multiple opposing salmons at once.
All right, so here we go, going into round 2. So we are going to be looking at Min, Proxy, Frydave, and Marley. Not quite sure why there was that little bit of like weird delay going on. So this is going to be interesting. They did catch up, so that's cool. But as we were talking about with this map, you know, it's kind of like you said, very centralized, right? So you need to be on this platform, you need to be as close to the basket as possible, and you don't have a lot of ways for you to utilize the strategy of the enemies coming towards you, because there's really only one way they can get you across those ramps.
Yeah, absolutely. If these teams wanted to lure the bosses closer, they have to wait much longer due to the fact that the bosses have to go to the very far side of the map and then come forward again.
And it looks like this was an interesting strategy. So they gave themselves a little bit of time, sort of at the bow of the ship, if you will, to wait for some of these bosses to come up instead of what I've usually seen, which is kind of spread out and paint as much of the map as possible so you have ways to maneuver around. So I think that was a really great idea, and I'm excited to see what other interesting things that they're going to pull from here.
So right now, I believe they recently just dealt with the first flyfish that spawned. Actually, they took out one of the launchers, so now they can prevent more than 3 of them from spawning, which I believe is their current strategy, actually.
I think that's very smart. I want to talk for a second about the weapons that they've chosen. So they do have a bamboozler, they have a sploosh, the dualies, and they have a blob lobber. I think blob is a great opportunity for this map because it has sort of this like downward slope. So you can really find a way to make sure that all of your blobs get where you want them to go.
Yeah, it's a very interesting pick, General Simon, but it is actually quite strong of a pick due to it has relatively high damage. The biggest difficulty of it is the velocity of its shots, which makes it a little bit slower at taking things out from when it fires and when it hits. But it's actually quite a good choice.
And I think they did really well for that first round there. You know, they were able, or wave 1, I guess, they were able to get 25 eggs out of their quota was only 14. So that's almost double, and I think that that's a really great start for them.
Especially on this map, as I said before, the bosses take much longer to get into convenient areas.
Yeah, like right here, you know, they're focused all the way on that left side, but it's going to take forever for that steel eel to come closer to mid. Maz, at least, is able to get up a lot faster, so they can at least get some of these early eggs into the basket, which is exactly what they're going to do. But they just have to wait it out for the steel eel to get close enough for them to do anything.
Absolutely. Early Maws are some of the best gifts in most Salmon rounds because those are the entire team can deal with them, even if their main weapons if they want to, but it's generally not a strategy due to how much HP the Maws has.
I think this, you know, I'm kind of focusing on Proxy down here, and I think that the maneuvering that they have is fantastic. They're making sure that, you know, that jump shot that they did into the flyfish was really great, and all team members are really pulling their weight here, and they're doing a great job making sure that they have all the angles covered, and I think that that's extremely important here.
One thing they did actually before Wave 1 even started was they actually painted the sides of the right propeller, which actually makes it so you don't have to wait for your team to be or your entire team to be on it when you want to go up.
Interesting. I think that's a really smart idea because, as you know, time is so important in this, and being able to get as many of these golden eggs as possible within such a short amount of time is very, very important. So I think that anything you can do in terms of prep work is going to be really good.
Looks like they got about 35 on that, which is actually quite a vast improvement from the first wave. They've had relatively little problems so far. They've not had anyone taken down, and they've managed to bring the boss closer without really having any big trouble.
Yeah, I think also they've done a great job holding on to their specials to give them an opportunity to use on this, the third and final wave, anything that they can. And they also have the tough luck here of High Tide, which I think this to me is one of the harder maps to do High Tide because it's so horizontal that you don't really have anywhere else to go. You can't utilize those sides. It's not square. It's just rectangular.
This is where the Stingray shines, though, and I believe they do have one Stingray left, which will likely be used to take out multiple bosses that are in a line, as a Stingray does very well.
I like the maneuvering that's going on too. You know, they are able to target some of these further away enemies. They want to make sure that they're, you know, utilizing their time very well, which I like. We did have a player go down, so I think that was only their first one, which is still really commendable.
At the current moment, they're still in a good spot. Their player going down did not really cause them any significant problems.
I like here also the positioning of their charger is so far out, and to me that would worry me a little bit, and I think to me, like, this looks like they're in for tough luck. Yeah, unfortunately they're not going to be able to survive that, but there are a couple of specials still online. We have 2 splashdowns, both Inkjets and Stingrays are done. So it's just going to be a matter of getting these last couple of eggs. They did get to 30 at least. I think they'll be able to get in a few more. So it's been a really great run for them.
And final score of 33 in the third wave, which pretty solid score as well. Especially on Marooner's Bay, where you never know how difficult it is.
Yeah.
You never know. Especially when boss spawns are so random, and especially in this map when it takes them so long to get into good positions. So a score of 93 is what they ended up with.
Okay.
So one thing I actually wanted to talk about was the usage of specials. So what I noticed there was they actually didn't end up using all of them. And I actually did see several of them using the third wave. Now, one of the strategies that many people might not know of is, especially when you're going for high score, what I've heard from a lot of the top Salmon players is that they will use their specials early, even in the first or second waves. They might use both of them then, because they know they can handle those pretty well. So they use the specials to boost their score higher when there's less difficulty in general running eggs. Although that does lose you the safety net in case you're in a bad situation in the third wave, but when you have the easier difficulties in the first 2 waves, using a special to boost your score higher is something that is actually done a lot more these days.
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting way that there are these different kind of strategies that are going on. And when you play Salmon Run kind of casually, as we were mentioning earlier, it's a very different concept, I guess, than this kind of very thoughtful, you know, what you mentioned, using your specials earlier. So speaking of special, this is one of the kind of special modes that are available for Salmon Run. This is glowflies, right? Yes,
absolutely. In this mode, the only 2 enemies that spawn are goldies and chums. But they move at a much faster rate, as you can see, than they normally would, which can lead to quick team wipes if they are not careful.
Yeah, I think right now they're being very careful and very smart in terms of their positioning. The moment that one of the players has glowflies upon them, they're kind of retreating to the bow of the boat, and the other players, especially the Bloblobber, are sort of guarding some of these ramps to make sure that it's a lot harder for these very quickly moving enemies to get close enough to them to do any damage.
But they actually went 2 down a couple of times just now. And they did actually reach the quota very quickly, but going 2 down on those 2 occasions actually prevented them from increasing the score even higher, which is actually quite a high score still right now.
Yeah, 37 is amazing to me. 38, I believe they might even hit 50 because they do have enough time to get all of these in, and if they can get some of these goldies close enough to the basket that it won't take them a lot of time to get those eggs, they can there we go, 50, 53. I mean, we still have 10 seconds left.
This is one of the biggest benefits of being able to pick your weapons. In most rotations that the game would just give to you, you wouldn't be able to do this. But because these players can pick weapons that do plenty of damage very quickly, they're able to take out the bosses where they want to and get a 59 score as they just did.
An amazing score. Amazing score. Ooh, so this one is low tide. Really, really fun. I actually enjoy this map as low tide more than kind of any of the other ones.
This one, it has that little circular area in the left and middle. So it's, in a sense, it could be similar to spawning grounds, but it has that little, it attaches the left and middle side.
Yeah, I think it's it allows you to kind of get to some of those further out bosses, but I like their positioning here because they haven't utilized that. They don't want to get too far from one another because they want to be able to help each other up if somebody goes down and be ready to use some of these specials on close-up kind of enemies. So we do have an Inkjet and a Stingray that have gone off already. We still have both bomb rushes and both splashdowns. So I think they're just going to wait for the most, there's a splashdown going down. I was going to say the most optimal time to kind of utilize some of those.
Splashdown is it's a very, very strong special at just clearing the area around you very quickly. And if you could take out a steelhead with a splashdown, that a steelhead actually will explode and take out bosses around them too, which is a generally unique property of it.
Yeah, I was almost waiting if that timing had been a little better for when the second bomb was going to come off from that steelhead. We could have gotten both of those out with one splashdown.
But it looks like they're going to finish with another strong score here. Although they do have one player down, but they've managed to keep it under control most of the wave, and they're actually going to end up with a score of higher than 40 again, which is quite good.
Very nice. So right now they're already sitting almost to 100. 59 and 42, they're over 100.
Oh, actually, you don't see that often in 2 waves.
You don't. I think that they were really lucked out with that glowflies because it's just so many eggs so quickly. So this is what you were talking about earlier, correct? Where they painted that side of the platform so that they don't have to kind of utilize their ink to get up.
Yes, absolutely. You don't necessarily want to be down there too often, so that is very much a strategy that helps.
This also, I know that they had to go for that Stingray to kind of take them out very quickly, but you lose a lot of time when you have to go all the way to the other side of the map, where this is the strategy of pulling a lot of these enemies closer to you and closer to the basket. But I'm a little worried now because they're on their third wave. Their quota is 21, and we know that it's going to get a lot more difficult when you get to that third wave. So they have to be very, very careful in terms of making sure their positioning is very strong to help defend one another.
Sometimes bad boss spawns do make it much more difficult. And I believe at the start of the wave they did have the stinger, and now they actually have another stinger spawning just now with half a flyfish, which from the other side of the map, and because of what's in front of them, they don't even have a stingray to deal with it from their own basket, which they do have the quota, but
if they can't stay alive.
Yeah, I'm like,
yeah, I'm a little worried for them. I think they'll be able to do it because they're less than almost to 10 seconds right now. So, it's very difficult for a team to kind of go 4 down within this amount of time. So I think that they'll clutch it out, and I believe maybe they'll get to 40. Not quite enough time. 39 is still really, really strong, and they have had an absolutely fantastic round for this.
yeah, the first wave being Glowflies very much played to their weapon strength. And
140 eggs.
That was a very, very, very high number,
That is amazing,
to say the least.
I was looking over to see if they were kind of celebrating that, but I think they're just feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, just have to remember that it's the total of both rounds.
Yes, the total, not the average.
Yes.
Yeah. So 233 so far. I mean, that
might be hard to beat, actually.
I think that seems to me like that's going to be a top score right there.
Especially on Marooners Bay, where it's difficult to rack up the quota, or difficult to rack up golden eggs in general compared to other maps.
Wow. Yeah, it really will. I'm wondering what's going on for the rest of the teams and how everyone else is doing, what the situation is for some of these and who is left in the running. I'm kind of scanning some of the other lobbies over here.
Yeah, I believe they had a tiebreaker. Yeah. They believe they had a tiebreaker actually before this match on stream, and when a tiebreaker actually is on the max hazard level.
Ooh.
If it comes to that, which we'll
Oh,
get to later
man.
as well.
I think, to me, that's very difficult for two teams to have a tie because you have to have the exact same number of
Yeah,
eggs.
absolutely. And especially with the amount of variance that can happen in this mode with the different events and tie changes.
Yes.
You don't see that too often.
You really don't. And I think it's really fun to be able to watch some of those happen. And, you know, I'm not quite sure what map that was on, but it probably could have played into something too.
Yeah, it was on spawning grounds.
Okay.
So the very first map that was in Salmon Run.
Okay. So that makes sense. It's something that everybody kind of knows the best because that's the one that
Yeah, absolutely.
has been played the most. I think moving on to our third round, the Salmonoid Smoke Yard. I have to admit, okay, I love Salmon Run, but I don't play it as often as I'd like to because I'm not very good at it. Me, typical Splatoon. But I really love this map. My two favorites are Salmonoid Smoke Yard and the Ruins of Arc Polaris because I think they're just designed very interestingly, and there's different ways that you can kind of navigate around the maps.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest changes, or not changes, but like differences with Salmon and Smoke Yard compared to other maps is that on high tide, you can only cross to the other side with the two propeller platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you might see even if you play freelance, you might see a teammate just hang there the whole time, and it'll make it makes it difficult to run eggs because they're always tracking the bosses to them over there.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes bosses do spawn there, such as stingers, and unless you have a stingray or a very long-range weapon, you won't be able to take them out unless you go over there.
Long-range weapon. So we were talking before this, and you had mentioned E-Leader is kind of a top choice for Salmon Run.
Yeah. One of the things about E-Leader is that it actually does 600 damage on a full charge.
Wow.
And naturally having the longest range as well,
Yeah.
which even on a map like Marooners Bay very much helps take out bosses from further away because of how far away they spawn from the basket as well.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But something on a map like Salmon and Smoke Yard, you might actually be able to get away with not having a long-range weapon
Okay.
because unless it's high tide,
Yeah.
but on anything else, because the bosses spawn very, very close to the basket in general, maybe not so much on low tide, but in low tide you have a decent amount of space to work with regardless. But on normal tide of Salmon and Smoke Yard, everything spawns, I believe it spawns the closest, or it takes the least time to get to the basket from where the bosses spawn. I might be wrong in this, but
Interesting. And even on high tide, you would think?
on high tide, if they spawn where the basket is.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think also what I like about it is, if you're all on that same side, you don't have a lot of ground where you have to cover and spread out. So if one of your teammates goes down, it's very easy to throw a bomb, or kind of even with a short range weapon, you can usually get them back up pretty quickly.
Yes, absolutely. It's how it is. Salmon and Smoke Yard, I believe it is mutually agreed on as the easiest map to get high scores.
Ooh.
I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe that's what I've heard from most people that have said has talked about high scores in general.
So I wonder if we're going to see a score that was higher than that last one, because I think in terms of 2 rounds, that was amazing.
There's a possibility, but any normal high tide wave might make that difficult.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. So you would definitely have to kind of figure out what the best way to approach that is. And I think there are just so many different variables that you can't anticipate everything. So you have to go with your gut of what's the strongest thing you can play, the best way that you're going to be able to maneuver something, and just throw your heart into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there are some weapons that are specialist in certain events, such as like the Dynamo Roller is one of the best in goalie seeking because
Yeah.
you can just put the roller down, the goalie will just walk towards it, and it will just drop its eggs immediately.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't pick a Dynamo Roller normally in this kind of thing because you're not picking weapons just to prepare for one event only.
Okay. Interesting. So what are some of the other weapons? We kind of saw, we talked about in that last one some of the ones that you and I had spoken about. Dapples, Sploosh. I was shocked and excited to see Bloblobber. We had talked about Bamboo as something that a lot of people would play. You had mentioned before we went live about Explosher too. So what's kind of the main draw of playing an Explosher?
The Explosher has the unique property of being the only main non-Grizzle weapon to be able to take out flyfish with its main weapon.
Huh.
You can do this by using your sloshes into the flyfish missiles, and yeah, I know the Grizzle slosher can do this as well. It can actually take it out in one hit, but in this tournament there are no Grizzle weapons, so
yeah.
Or else everyone would just pick them all the time.
Oh my gosh, I would pick them every time. It's one of my favorite things to play when Grizzco weapons are in rotation.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so much fun.
That was where my first 99 came from.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
I think it's just, a different kind of idea. And there were so many good things that came out of Splatoon 2 in terms of playability and excitement for players. And I think Salmon Run having all of these variables and the randomness aspects to it, and then introducing like the Grizzco weapons just makes you more excited to play these things once you feel like you've gotten a handle on it.
Yeah, absolutely. To be quite honest, this mode would not be what it is without all these different events and different variables that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do not think people would want to just go through normal tide waves every single time. It becomes too much of a like boring routine at that point.
Absolutely, yeah. I think even, as you mentioned, normal tide waves, we have a couple of special waves. We did see glowflies. We saw that low tide, which to me doesn't seem to happen as often as mid or high tide. Do you know if there's a percentage?
I'm not 100% sure of a percentage, but I feel like the Salmon Run community probably knows that better than I do, actually.
That's okay. If you're in the Salmon Run community, I'd love the answer. So, feel free to message me about that.
Yeah. But shout out to them. They've actually managed to create many different resources on the mechanics, even the most specific details of them as well, such as when bosses spawn, or the direction of bosses, or when they change their area of spawn, how many enemies can be on the map at once. Like the most tiniest of details that you may never have thought about, they've actually come up with the data for this.
I think one of the most interesting things that I had found is looking at the maps of where Goldie seeking is. So if you find your first Goldie in this location, then it's going to kind of move across the map in this way. If you find it in this location, it'll move in this direction. And that kind of changes depending upon where it spawns, but it always remains consistent after that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's much more clear in high tide where the Goldie will go in Goldie seeking because of the fewer amount of areas they can come from.
Mm-hmm.
While in normal tide, it can be a bit, or the RNG, you would say, of where it goes might play a bit of a bigger factor. But the Salmon computer has actually done very well, even again with coming up with the pictures of, or the guide of how to find it and how to minimize the difficulty of getting the eggs to the basket.
And so where kind of the optimal way to take out the Goldie is once you get that, is the strategy to completely annihilate the Goldie or let it continue to walk and try to pick them up as it goes?
Generally, the strategy is to make sure it gets close to the basket, and especially with all these high damage per second weapons that people can pick, you have the luxury of doing so.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's, it's really good to be able to have those options, and especially in a tournament like this, because you can pick what you want. When you're playing a regular rotation, you don't have that. So some people choose to sit out certain rotations because they don't want to deal with a certain weapon, or other people would choose to tackle that as a challenge because they want to be able to prove that they can still get to 999 with that set.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the top Salmon players, they have the biggest dedication I've ever seen in like general, to be quite frank.
I agree. And getting to that like max difficulty is terrifying when you watch some of these players and how quickly they can move throughout the map, how fast they can take down bosses, how easily they can utilize different weapons depending upon what they get. It's amazing.
One of the biggest things, not necessarily the biggest thing, but it's more of a small thing to know about Hazard Level Max is, yes, it does play that little spooky sound and has the text with Hazard Level Max on the screen before the wave starts, but without that, it's basically just a normal wave. It's just the highest difficulty. It's not a massive difficulty spike from the previous level. The quotas are just like slightly higher than.
Okay.
It's 21, 23, 25, and that's as high as it goes. But it's not much. It's not much higher than the next level below it, really.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, we'll see what they're going to be able to do. Looks like we have our next team seated up there. So we're going to wait for everybody to get ready. In terms of looking around, I am unsure who is still left in the competition, because going on to round 3, we'll be able to knock out half of the teams again, and then going on to our final round. So it's going to be really fun to see what shakes up here. I'm looking around, and we had a lot of teams who first participated in this.
Oh, absolutely. I think there are actually more teams than probably anticipated, actually.
Yes.
Which is quite nice to see.
I think so. I think it's been, really fun to watch people kind of get into Salmon Run and enjoying it. And, I absolutely can't wait to see what these head-to-heads are going to look like and who's going to take home the golden egg. I don't know. What would the equivalent of bacon be?
We'll just go with that. It's the closest thing we can get, and it's the first thing we thought about, so
yeah.
it fits well enough.
Okay, good. I'm okay with that. So it'll be really fun. We got to see a lot of different things there. The number one thing I'm looking forward to seeing, though, I want to see Mothership, because I think it's one of the most fun modes to play, and I'd like to see a Mothership on these kind of pro players that we see here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of the biggest things about Mothership is using a Stingray on it, because there's a certain because it keeps dropping those little boxes, and it's an easy way of getting eggs.
Mm-hmm.
We're not sure if we'll actually get to see it, but that's a thing to look out for if it does happen.
All right, so here we go, Salmonoid Smoke Yard, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they are going to pick. So we have a Flingza, which is really, really fun, and a Bamboo, another Bloblobber, and another Sploosh. So this is going to be really, really exciting. I'm stoked.
Yeah, the Flingza roller is not something that's seen too often, even in general in this game.
Mm-hmm.
But the Flingza roller has a very strong vertical flick in this mode. It actually has the ability to take out steelheads with one vertical flick if it's close enough.
Okay.
And the roller also is very good at taking out smaller salmonids by just rolling over them.
Yeah, it seems like it. I think the Bamboo does have a bit of range, so that'll be helpful, but I kind of worry that they're missing some of the longer power range. Maybe that would come from kind of having the Bloblobber that will be able to travel pretty quickly. The Bloblobber for this map is especially going to be useful when they're in mid-tide like this, or even low tide. But I think if they hit high tide here, that's not going to help them.
I'd actually say that the Bloblobber is actually quite useful in high tide here, because it actually has the ability to take out stingers from the basket side of the map. It can actually go on those left-sided grates there to take them out on high tide.
It can? It's
Yes.
not going to go through the grate?
If they slosh high enough, they can actually take out stingers from the other side.
Interesting. I was completely unaware of that. So, yeah, I think that then this would be pretty smart. This is what I was talking about earlier, how close everybody is there. So once a teammate does go down, you're coming back to the basket anyway, and I think you can pick them up pretty quickly. 34 eggs for this first wave. I'm very excited to see what they have in for wave 2 then.
Yeah, absolutely. They did leave a stinger there at the very end, but their score is still good regardless.
Yes.
It looks like we have more normal tides, so more of the same, I suppose.
Yeah. And this is kind of what you were talking about, how, you know, without the special modes to mix things up, it can get a little monotonous for players.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, the different events just keep it even keeps it challenging.
That was a really beautiful shot on that Drizzler, and I think that Booyah coming up really knew it too.
Booyahs are still nice even when you have voice chat.
Yes, and the this ways as well. You know, even just getting that other little bit of game sound from kind of your friends and your partners here, you have that extra way when somebody can't quite call out something fast enough.
Gives you an extra way to express your happiness.
Yes. So I think so far they're very close to quota. They're going to hit it right now. And now they can just work on getting that number pretty high. They've concentrated themselves very close to this right side, which I think is smart. But when they're coming in with some of these other bosses, they will need to be ready to spread out a little bit, as they might get a little crowded here in a second.
So another thing to note is actually that bosses stop spawning around the 28 to 27 time remaining mark.
Okay.
So once that happens, you're basically free to go wherever you want and take them out, because you know that there's not going to be any more of those big bosses to come back and try and hurt you.
Amazing. And I think that's sort of what they did, right? They cleaned up all of the bosses there, 40 eggs, really beautiful number. And at that end, they were just kind of waiting for time to come down, collecting a couple extra orange eggs as they went.
Yeah, once the bosses were gone, there's not really much.
Yeah.
There's not much they needed to do at that point.
So we have our first low tide on this map. I think this is also very interesting because you have a way that you can get across from sort of these fingers, if you will, on either side of the basket, but it's so far away that if you get caught over there by yourself, you have a long way to go to get back to your teammates and be revived.
Very few weapons can actually go over there and survive if there's multiple things attacking them. So most players will avoid that area in general.
Yeah, I think it's a little dangerous, but maybe if they have, if they have a stinger, they might have to go for it. If they can use that bloblobber in a way that it'll allow them to take it out from a further distance, I think that would be very smart. But I also like this kind of play that they had there. They all backed up past the basket in order to draw a lot of the bosses towards them. Yeah,
absolutely. The range at which bosses detect players. So one of the things about that steelhead there is that once it's close enough to a player, it will stop and charge a bomb up. But backing up allowed them to bring it just a little bit closer to make it much easier for them to deposit the eggs afterwards.
I am a little scared right now, Drift, because we have a stinger on both sides. I think they were able to take out the one on the right side, and it looks like on the left side too. Okay, so I had nothing to worry about. But that scared me for a second when you saw both of them coming up at the same time together.
I'm not sure if one of them used an inkjet to take them out, but I believe Kimchi still has actually still has another stingray left, so it's kind of interesting.
And there are 2 splashdowns too.
And they ended with 35, so
not
solid
bad
score still.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they did a really fantastic job there. And I'm looking forward to seeing. I love that always too, when you kind of jump off into the water at the end.
Yeah, the party at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Either everyone just having fun. Yeah, jumping off the map is a common thing too.
Yeah, 109 is a fantastic score, especially I think for this map where they didn't have any special modes.
Yeah, they're not. It was just one low tide, and that was the only thing that was different from the normal tide that is standard.
Yeah, they really did.
I believe the next game is actually going to be on 170% difficulty.
Ooh.
So, of course, that'll be more challenging than the last one.
Yeah. I like that the difficulty increases each time. I think that it's really nice because the players are challenged in a different way. You know, in round 2, we went from 120 difficulty to 160, and then round 3, we started at 140, now we're going to 170. So we're working our way up to that 200%.
Yeah, absolutely. That was also that was also a very good way of getting all these teams to join. Starting them at hazard level max in the first round would be very challenging for them.
Yeah.
Because some of them might not have even seen it before.
me.
Oh,
But I think it's still fun, and if you play consistently, you do have those strategies in place to be able to tackle something like that.
yeah, absolutely. You, even once you get familiar with the players you play with, it just like many things in life, it becomes easier and easier.
Yeah. If you can rely on them to have your back, which this game is very much about that, because you have to be ready to revive your teammates very quickly to help them out if they're in a tough spot, pop a special to save somebody who's being surrounded, and you need to rely on your teammates for all those things.
Absolutely. Even with all this high scoring and all these different strategies, the main thing to focus on is to never get team wiped.
Yes, absolutely. If in the case you are team wiped and it's close enough to the end of the wave, a little strategy that you can do is to throw a bomb, because actually the timer won't end considering it a team wipe until that bomb explodes. So if you're in like the last 2 or 3 seconds and you know you're about to die, you can throw a bomb and try to kind of time that out.
Well, it looks like we're actually getting into the next round, I believe. And
Getting right into the middle of it very, very quickly. They are already at the 20 mark here with 20 eggs, and they're being accosted from all sides.
but they do have good boss spawns coming in, so that will very much help their quest to get the highest score.
And they have a lot of eggs up on this platform here, almost 12 at the same time right there. And that's going to help increase their egg count exponentially. They're already up to 35, and they still have 15 seconds left. So I think they're looking pretty good.
They did have one player go down there, but they very much had the things they needed to dealt with, so that it didn't hinder them too much.
Yeah, and I think that was a pretty good first wave for them. 41 is still rather nice, and it allows them to feel pretty comfy about going into the second wave.
Yeah, it looks like we're having another normal wave here again. Just a repeat of last time again.
Maybe we'll see a special one for wave 3.
Maybe some of the unique ones.
Absolutely. So even still, I think this is pretty good. Their positioning up here is great. The 3 bombs, a little overkill.
Yeah, most of them will communicate which launcher they throw it into. But sometimes if everyone just throws it in, they'll generally do the job.
Yeah, and it seemed like at that moment they only really had that one fly fish to contend with, so they wanted to take it out, and if you have nothing else going on, you might as well use the opportunity to do that.
Actually, there is a stingray just used by MK Latu.
I think that was a really good stingray because they were able to get 3 bosses with it.
Yeah, that's a big key with specials in general, is especially these early specials. The early specials do allow you to get a higher score, more so than just a late special, just to make sure that you don't lose.
Yes, very true. I really like also, their boss spawns are kind of helping them out in terms of getting very close to the basket here. So they just have to be careful with some of those further ones, like the stingers that they had out. Be conscious of where that's coming from. And also, I think another strategy we haven't quite discussed are when those chums come in and they steal the golden eggs.
Yeah, so those I believe are called snatchers.
Snatchers.
They do not do any damage. But, as you said, they do take the eggs and will eventually walk away with them. It's more so an issue if eggs are at the very edge of the map where you have to go out of your way to reach them. But in general, they're very easy to take out, and it's not too much of an issue on these kind of tournaments where you can just pick your weapons and easily able to maneuver around the map without too much issue.
Yeah, it seems like we're starting in the same way for this last wave here. They had that first fly fish. They're going to take out this stinger before it can get any kind of advantage on them. And this is going to be the highest quota and the hardest wave for them to tackle here. They only have, they do have enough specials, I guess, because they have 2 splashdowns, 1 inkjet, 1 bomb rush, and 1 stingray.
I very much like their special users in the second wave. Near the end of it, Kimchi actually used one of the inkjets to take a stinger while their teammates ran the rest of the eggs, which is very well played.
Yeah, I think using this Stingray is also really smart. You know, they did take out a Stinger. They had 2 on either side, which creates a very tough opportunity for, you know, the players to kind of move around. So I think they did some really smart thinking of how they were going to tackle that. And now, you know, they're past quota, but this is where things are getting really hard. They're almost to that point where you mentioned that bosses stop spawning. So as long as they can get there, they might feel pretty good.
It appears they've got there already, and they actually have very good boss spawns to end it too.
They do. I think having these scrappers is great because they've come very close to the basket. They're going to be able to take both of those out with that splashdown. That's like 9 eggs right there.
Absolutely. Scrappers are one of the easiest bosses to bring towards the basket in general because of how fast they travel.
And now they're just kind of waiting around yet again. This was a fantastic, fantastic score. You can hear our spectators clapping and really excited for them.
That absolutely was a strong score. I believe they definitely passed 100.
Oh yeah, I think they were at like
147.
Yeah, that is amazing. Even they are celebrating up there, which is great. So much fun, and it looks like they brought cheer cards, I think.
Yeah. That is one of the that is a score that would be you very much see on Twitter.
Yeah, that would definitely be. I hope some of them clipped it, and they can, you know.
Yeah, really hope that's actually enough to make the finals too.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Because in the finals, there's actually 3 rounds instead of 2. And
Interesting.
the 3rd round is actually on the max difficulty.
Ooh, okay, all right. So unfortunately, due to venue rules, at 10 o'clock, which is right now, we weren't allowed to continue to have the big screen up. So our spectators are not going to be able to get to watch, and they'll just have to kind of listen to us for a little bit. We might be able to stretch it as long as we can, but it's, you know, it's really fun to be able to watch these people play Salmon Run. So it would be great to continue to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. The finals being on 3 different maps and being on 3 different difficulties, especially with Game 3 being on the max hazard level, will pretty much give the biggest test that they probably have had.
Really, really will. I can't wait to see. I'm assuming we're going to see that last team. I didn't quite catch their name, but, you know, players that I'm familiar with from casting traditional tournaments, I've seen. So I think that guess that you had early on of how does the technical skill stack up in a traditional tournament versus a Salmon Run was pretty spot on because they're people that we've seen play before. All right, so we're getting an announcement to see who the last 4 teams are. Listening to hear what Pacecat, our head TO, has to say about it. The Stains, that is Milana and the Barry's team that they have 2 professional Salmon Run players with them. I want to go ahead and read their little bio in our guide here. So Hootie and Slash are professional salmon runners and recruited Barry and Milana onto their egg farming team once their compendium goals were met. And Barry and Milana, in turn, convinced them to participate in the traditional tournament.
I believe they convinced each other to enter the other event that they aren't quite as familiar with.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's a good opportunity to kind of cross-contaminate, if you will, your friends' play styles.
I kind of see what you did there.
You know, I mean, maybe it works. I don't know. Maybe it's also a little late at night, and, you know, I'm
it's
still
getting
on
to that point.
Eastern Standard Time, so.
Right, yeah. That's not something I've experienced too much.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's been really fun to be here at Genesis 7. This is my first Genesis. I saw them at another land maybe 6 months ago or last year, and you just don't always get to talk to them online. You don't get to have those conversations. But in person, you can sit down and, maybe have lunch with them or share soda or just stay high, and you still have that. So, all right, here we go. Our grand finals. So we're unsure of some of these names, which is fine, but we're...
There they are.
Oh, there we go. All right, so this is the team that we saw earlier that ended with 233 with their 2 rounds?
Yes, I believe
okay.
that is the team. So we're going to be on 100% difficulty, which is what was started out with.
Okay.
So the codes will be low for this one.
Should be pretty low. So you had mentioned before stream maybe 13 or 14?
Yes, I believe 13 is the lowest quota you can get in terms of, well, actually, you can go under 100, but 13 is the lowest in terms of professional level, or professional difficulty, or grade, however you call it.
So good. So that'll be good. And we get to see my favorite map, the Arc of Polaris. I absolutely love the rails on this. I think it was genius to be able to have a map where you can circumnavigate it so easily using these rails.
Yeah, absolutely. With this being the newest and last map being added, most people are probably not all that familiar with this map, but I believe these two teams in the finals will be very familiar because one of them has a couple of professionals and the other one, they most likely here just to play this.
I want to point something out that I just noticed visually. When you look at these screens 4 up, all of our zigzags and our salmons actually meet. You can follow one from your top left or top right across to the left, and it continues, and it's still there.
Oh, yeah. I get what you mean.
So really just these little details that the developers have put into this game, are part of the reasons that we've all fallen in love with it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. The small details help a lot. And you can see all 4 dabble dualies, which seems like a crazy pick, but it actually makes a lot of sense.
Well, they are changing around.
Okay,
I think they're going to go back to, this idea. I love this.
Yeah.
Crowd getting hyped. Everybody is excited. We are excited. Our head TO Pacecat is excited. It's going to be so much fun. Let's get to this grand final. So, all right, what's your anticipation of their score?
I feel like they'll reach 100 in both waves.
Okay.
So I'm thinking around, I feel like they'll reach at least they'll probably reach around 220.
220.
I think.
Okay. We're gonna see who's right here. So you're saying 220, and I'm gonna go ahead and guess 263.
All right, and the quota is actually at 13. So
Ooh.
There's a certain limit you can get in terms of score unless you kill bosses very fast or unless you take out bosses very fast.
Yeah, and I think this might be what you were talking about earlier, how you can kind of use your specials earlier on in the waves to take some of these bosses out quicker and get some higher scores.
Yeah, especially in this low quota when you're most likely not going to have much danger in general because of the weapons you're picked.
Okay, that would make sense, of course. I think the kind of downfall to this map is that it's very, very large, and you do have the rails that will help you navigate it, but it might not always be the optimal place for you to pick up some of these golden eggs and then move throughout it. So that can be a little bit of a detriment to what they're going for here, and I wonder if that could affect their score.
Yeah, the verticality on this map makes it much slower to bring eggs from the bottom to the top. And another detail is that the Drizzler torpedoes might get stuck on the walls, which makes it, and you might not be able to see it sometimes, and then you'll see an ink storm around and you have no idea where it's coming from.
Yeah, that would absolutely make sense, and I think, you would then have to contend with something that could make it harder for you to maneuver. Oh no, not knowing that steel eel, almost running straight into it, and we have the double steel eels. Both of them go down really quickly though, so that's going to be helpful. They're less than 10 seconds now. If they can get these eggs in, it's going to be huge for them. At the very least, they are able to double their score, so pretty good start so far.
Yeah, especially on this map too, where it's actually quite a challenge to get a high score on this one because, as I said, the verticality.
Yeah, and I think starting out with, a 100% difficulty, maybe it's a little easier to get a higher score when you have, more bosses that are spawning in quickly. But we did see this team last time when they had glowflies. They did a fantastic job. Maybe that was the map lending itself a little bit to their positioning, but we'll see if they're going to be able to pull it off yet again. They don't have that bloblobber this time that was able to take them out very quickly, but it might not be necessary.
But what they do have is the roller, and what the roller could do is they can just put the roller down and just hit their control stick just a little bit forward, and they will actually be able to take out all those chums in one roll.
Amazing.
They won't be able to take the Goldie out like this as easily, but they have teammates for that.
Yes. And I think that's really, really important that, if you're able to kind of cover your team, just like that roller did there, and bringing the Goldie all the way up to the one who is infested with those glowflies is going to be really helpful to get some of those eggs close to the basket here.
Another thing about this map too is that the bosses actually take very long to get up to the top as well. So even though they're actually trying to wait for everything to come towards them, but it does take a while.
It certainly does, and I think it's going to be, even a little longer still. Oh, that took a while too. I know they tried to save their teammate here, but it takes a long time to respawn when you go down, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing is that they did paint those small walls just in case that they have to grab an egg from the lower ground.
Yeah, not quite as good on this time around as they did the last time they had glowflies, but still able to get 30. So we're in pretty solid possible 90 scenario here.
Yeah, even then they do have three rounds. So
they do.
Even if they might not be satisfied with the score now, they have higher difficulties as well. And as you did say, higher difficulties actually very much lead to higher scores because of the boss spawn rate being higher as well.
Yes, very, very true there.
But it appears that we're actually going to see grillers now for the first time on stream.
Grillers is my least favorite mode. Mode? Can we call it that? Special mode? Special wave?
I believe they call it event.
Event. Okay.
But grillers was something that actually many people struggled with in general, to the point where they actually made it so that 5 eggs would spawn from a griller that is taken out instead of the normal 3.
I think 5 is much more doable because, as we can almost see here, just getting those 4 of them, they're going to be able to hit their quota and go a bit over it. So, obviously with this, you're focusing on score. You want to get as many bosses as you can out at a certain time, and they do have an opportunity to get a few more at least, but at some point soon, we're going to get 2 on the map at the same time.
Yes. And with the weapons that they have, they're able to easily stun Griller. So they're not going to have very much difficulties with this.
They certainly aren't. I think those small fries are almost what's going to cause a little bit more of a challenge. They need to use their roller to just completely take them out over and over again.
Yeah, that's where the roller and the sploosh come in. But they've actually reached 40 already.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. They've done a really good job here. I think they'll be able to get it to 45 maybe. No, not quite. But still, we have 104, I think. 30, 30, and 44.
Still a stalled score for this map, too.
Yeah, I think so, too. I think they've proven that they can kind of handle anything that's thrown at them.
You're spot on with the math there.
Yeah, good. That's unusual for me.
Yeah, getting over 100 on Arc Polaris with 2 normal tide waves is pretty solid, especially with the low quotas that they had. Or not the low quota, or yes, the low quotas that were a thing. Okay.
So I'm unsure, I believe.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah.
The next team is actually going to come in and do their round 1, and then they will stay on the stage to do their round 2 as well.
Got it. So we're sort of like swapping them out here because now we have teams going kind of head-to-head here, right?
Yes, I believe. I'm not sure if this is what they call it in Splatoon, but they do call it serpentine.
Okay.
I believe that's a term used in other things such as maybe like I don't know, fantasy American sports where you have to. It determines the order of like where you pick players.
Yeah, like that's what I was thinking too in terms of draft. You know,
Yes.
you go down the line and then you get to the end and then you reverse backwards.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's really good and smart. And, you know, now Team 2 has an opportunity to kind of set the score. You know, they know exactly how many eggs they need. They need 104. And if they can get over that, then they can feel a little more confident going into their round 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they still, as we said, have 3 rounds, so.
That 200% difficulty is going to be the real
yes,
challenge.
That will be the real challenge, very much.
Wow. We do have another side event going on. I have a Turf War side event that I came up with almost 2 years ago now. And I really urge you guys to play if you're hanging out at G7. Play right now, submit your scores, because tomorrow at 2 p.m. Pacific time, we'll be doing finals for that.
Yeah, Turf War, it is your favorite mode.
It is.
Yes. I actually quite like Turf War, but
good.
There's more so because I actually decently understand the way Japanese players play it.
Okay.
They don't play it to get splats. They play it to basically hold the entire map, and if someone tries to take them out, they just reject that and then basically win from there, which is where all those like ballers come from.
That makes sense. I can understand that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the idea of this, you know, Turf Royale is the rebrand from what was Turf the Halls, and you play solo. You know, you're counting up your total points inked, and then the top 8 players with the highest score over their 5 games that they've played today will go on to our finals tomorrow.
Yeah, but you would join a normal online turf rotation in this case, which allows you to play with very much different people.
And that could be, you know, to your detriment. Like here in Salmon Run, you know exactly what's going on with your teammates. You know how to make sure that they're where they need to be. You can kind of, once you've played with people for a while, feel people out, and you're sure of where somebody is going to come and how things are going to go. So I think that is really strong, where you sort of lose that when you go into solo queue, when you go into, you know, an online turf war, and it's all about your personal performance and how well can you anticipate what your teammates are going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest difficulty of going into games solo is that you only have so much you can control. And it's very easy to get frustrated at things you can't control, because you feel like you just feel like that you can't do anything, and it often leads to players getting disappointed at external reasons.
Okay.
I would say.
I understand that.
Like they might start feeling that the reason maybe they're not doing so well is because of their teammates per se.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's brought up more when the person is having difficulty.
That's understandable. And that's what we usually see on Twitter, you know, people kind of complaining about solo queue and sort of the things that are out of their control. But I guess, you know, we'll see what is in control here. Is Team Crupple at the top there? Is that how you would say that?
It depends. I wonder what language that is based off of, because that, if it was German, it'd be like Krupple, but I'm not 100% sure what that language is based, or what language that is from.
Yeah.
Or where the name comes from, really.
I'm unsure too of kind of what that's going to be. So it seems like due to the time constraints, and you know, we were supposed to kind of end this 25 minutes ago, we're going to have our Team 1 start on the other side of main stage with their next game. So, and then we'll still end up doing this swap out after that. But here we go. So we'll see what this team is able to do on Ruins of Arc Polaris, and how. Oh, we're getting some fog. I heard an "oh no" come out from one of the players on stage. This might be a challenge.
There is a very big benefit of high tide on this map, though, is that it is there is actually very little space to work with, but that can work to your benefit because everything spawns close to you.
Mm-hmm. And we already kind of talked about how the verticality of this map can be a challenge. So I think that having high tide might be to their benefit on this. Whereas if they were, I don't know, maybe this can work out.
This is also, there are those 2 rails that circle around the entire map, which are very useful to use on high tide in general. It allows you to survive for at least a little bit.
It certainly does. And I think that if they're in a tough spot, they can use those to kind of get out. You know, waiting for some of these bosses to spawn, though, is going to take some time here. I think they are doing the best they can to try to take them out as quickly as they can, so more spawn in faster and faster. So at least there's that they're doing a great job with turning them over.
And it appears that goalie unfortunately just released 1 egg.
Oh, no. Bad RNG.
You never really like to see that, but unfortunately that is random, whether it drops 1, 5, or 10 eggs.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting as well, because sometimes if you get lucky and you do get those 10 eggs, that's great, but it's all about chance.
Yeah, absolutely. It appears that they have taken out all the bosses that have spawned, so they do end up with a score of 33, which I believe is only slightly higher than their opponents.
Yeah, it seems like it. So I think that was pretty good. And now they're in for it low tide as well.
This is a very large map in terms of low tide. As you can see, there's a stinger that the first thing that spawned was a stinger, so they actually have to go all the way over across just to take it out, which they do have no problems doing, but it might not have been the thing that they wanted to do at the start of the wave.
Yeah, it seems like that could give a little bit of a setback for them. They were able to get those 3 eggs pretty quickly into the basket, but, it's still going to take some time here.
It appears that they very much do have the control of everything now. Although this Steel Hill did not really provide them any problems, though.
No, it doesn't look like it did, so that's gonna be helpful. And they're kind of racking them up. They have hit quota, and they still have 52 seconds left, so that's gonna work in their favor as well.
There was a stinger that just spawned on the other side, and I was looking at Dream's perspective, seeing with the Flingza roller, which isn't too good at taking out stingers, but Kimchi and the Blah Blobber actually was there to help out.
Well, that's good as well. So, they're doing pretty good. They have all of the rails active and ready to use it. Some of these missiles coming in, they're throwing up a couple this ways to try to get some of these last eggs brought closer to them, which is good. And if they can take out these last 2 bosses, which I'm sure they'll be able to, and get these eggs in, they're going to feel really confident about their score.
Looks like they will get 35 here. Oh, they actually end up with 36.
Great. I think that's a fantastic score. That puts them 9 points ahead so far.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll have to wait and see what event they get here. Will they get a nice event? Oh, it's actually a night event, so we'll see.
Interesting. So if this...
it's Goldie seeking.
It's Goldie seeking. Okay, so here's the strategies you were talking about, right? So you want to spread out and see which ones you can tackle first that are the furthest away. And there they go.
Yes, absolutely. It is actually very important to spread out in general, because you'll have one person that hits the furthest one away, and they will communicate how big the gusher is, so that someone else that is in a different area of the map can hit the next one straight away instead of having to swim over and do that.
Yeah, and I think they lucked out exactly the same spot for the next Goldie.
Yeah, sometimes that does happen. Usually not, but it's always great when it does happen.
Yeah, now they have a good amount of time that they can take. They can choose to just kind of rack up some of these eggs. It looks like they're searching for the next one, so that might be what they choose to do, but they have so many eggs over here that they can just get into the basket. They found another Goldie that they're going to use their time to kind of take out. Maybe these eggs are a little bit better position as the Goldie goes straight across, so they do have a lot of eggs that are close to the basket now.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like they might not even have to open any more gushers at this point. they actually do have a lot of eggs to run too, so maybe it's best not to do that. But they actually found the goalie already. So
Oh man.
and it's going straight to mid as well.
That was
very good for them.
very, very good. Really lucky. And look at all those golden eggs that they have right here. Less than 15 seconds. They certainly don't need to open another gusher. But they do anyway, and they find a goldie again.
Yeah, they do not have to, but they usually will, because more so for high scores, and generally as you can see, there's not many enemies in the map, and 55 score.
55. Wow. The applause going up here from our spectators too. Really wonderful. Really wonderful.
And they actually finished the final score of 124, which is actually higher than their opponents from the first game. But luckily we have 3 rounds, so
we have some time.
there's still two more shifts to go.
Yeah, amazing. 124. So for our next one, our game 2 is on 150% difficulty. So here we go, looking at these. So we have 124 versus that 104. So having that 20-point lead might make them feel really good about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Although there's still always the chance of special events happening, such as the goldie seeking, which fell very kindly to them. But they still had to work in all the other modes, in all the other events too. So
they did. So we'll be able to see what they're going to do in just a few minutes. I think they're setting everything up, and here we go into our game 2, 150% difficulty on Lost Outpost. So I think this is sort of one of the favorites, right?
Yes, this is a pretty standard map, although the walls do restrict view somewhat. The map is relatively square, you could say. So most of the bosses don't spawn too far away. Although there is that graded area facing straight ones from spawn. That might make it difficult for some of the weapons to grab the eggs and run with it.
I think so as well. I think also their strategy here of painting some of the walls all the way to top is very interesting, because they can, someone picked up a golden egg and sort of waited it out for a second. And I also like having this brush. I think the brush on this map is really, really strong.
Actually, about the brush. So the brush was actually regarded as the worst Salmon weapon for the longest time.
Really?
Yes, because its damage output was very weak. Its damage output relative to how much its ink capacity was very weak. For an example, it almost had to use its entire ink tank just to take out a scrapper.
Wow.
But then, in a somewhat recent patch, they actually buffed its damage. So now it's quite a useful weapon now.
I think it's working out pretty well for them so far. I really like how they've been handling it thus far. It's helping them move throughout the map. There are a lot of golden eggs right near this basket, and they're getting quite a few of these boss spawns all the way into this kind of walled area. That's helpful for them as well.
Well, they did take a little while just to deal with that stinger, but it is now gone. And it looks like they have dealt with all the threats aside from that one flyfish, which they can afford to leave.
And they're going to start off the first wave with another 36 eggs.
A lot of 30s, a lot of 30 scores, which you like to see.
Absolutely.
I believe we're getting high tide. Oh, it's goalie seeking again. And it's high tide too, which is even better for them.
Yeah, they have a more limited locations of where goldie can spawn here.
Yes. Although it might be slightly difficult because of all the gushers being so close to the basket, meaning that the enemies will have a smaller distance to cover to threaten the players.
Very, very true. I think something else they need to watch out for here are the snatchers, because if they can get close enough to steal a lot of these eggs, they're going to be in a lot of trouble having to watch out for them.
Yeah, this is where that's where the bamboozer comes in with just one. I believe they can actually take out snatchers with just one tap shot.
Ooh,
yeah,
interesting.
They're not very strong enemies by any means.
Yeah, it seems like it, and I think that would be very helpful. This is real lucky for them here, because the 2 locations the goldie was hiding in walked right through mid, right through the center of the map,
Absolutely.
right past
now
the basket.
They have They have all the eggs right in front of them.
They do. And they have already hit their 36 of the last round with still 30 seconds left.
Yeah, absolutely. And they did just find the Goldie with two Gusher opened. And it looks like they'll be able to, they might even be able to get to 50 here.
That would be absolutely amazing and a really tough score for the other team to beat.
Unless they get Goldie seeking themselves.
Yes.
But it looks like they found it again. Although I'm not sure if they'll have enough time to take the eggs back, though. They might, they'll have time to bring one in.
All right, 48. That's not bad.
Well, very much good for a Goldie wave.
Yeah, the Booyah's coming up. You know, they know it. They know that they're feeling pretty good. So we'll see what they get this time around. And they still have a lot of their specials up. 2 Stingrays, 2 Inkjets, a Bomb Rush, and a Splashdown.
Yeah, they didn't really have much of a need to use their specials in either of the waves. And especially in Goldie Seeking, you don't really use it unless you're in a desperate situation. Or if it's wave 3 and you don't need them. They actually just lured that Drizzler closer to the basket, which is something that a lot of players don't actually know about. Is that you can bring that closer just like almost any other boss in the game.
Interesting.
In fact, it's a very good idea to do so.
I had no idea that you could lure it, but I mean, I think it is very smart because then you also have an opportunity to shoot down that torpedo before it can get the ink storm out.
Yeah, especially on this map where the torpedo can get stuck on a wall.
Ooh,
in a place where you might not be able to see it. But this is a very good Inkjet, actually taking out 2 Stingers and being able to take out half a Flyfish as well, and using the water to end it early to deposit that egg.
Really nice job here.
Looks like they're about to get quota soon. They don't have as much time left as I would have thought, though.
That timing for that splashdown was perfect. Waited for everything to be in the absolute right position, and they're able to get quite a lot of eggs from that. You know, no new bosses will be spawning, but they do have a few that they can contend with still.
And there's actually still a Stinger on the left side. That might prove a bit difficult for them, especially with the Inkstorm going around in the same area too.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're going to be able to get any more of those eggs in, but I think another 36 is pretty good here. And, you know, this is going to put their score very, very high.
Yeah, absolutely. And then now the last round, which they'll be playing on hazard level max, their last round. And 120 is actually still a very good score in general.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that they really proved that what they're capable of here.
All right. And now they're showing their signs.
Yeah, I love the signs.
The signs that we all love to see.
All right, and it looks like our other team got 107 on their second round. So right now in the lead is definitely this team Krupple versus Curios.
They have a 33 egg lead. That's going to be quite difficult. That's going to be quite difficult to overtake.
It certainly will. I think that they have an opportunity to do so, and they certainly can, but it is going to be a challenge.
It is hazard level max, so that'll be the big test for both.
It will. It will. So we'll see what they can do. They're also going to be playing on spawning grounds, which we have not had an opportunity to see yet because that was the first round that was played off stream.
The very first Salmon Run map.
All right, here we go. So the last one, hazard level max. There we go. Showing the, same as we showed those signs earlier. 200% difficulty.
Yeah, they know.
So I love that.
Yeah, the crowd's getting hyped for this. And it looks like they're actually going to get low tide in the first wave, too.
Ooh, that's pretty helpful here for this map. I think that, you know, as long of an area as it is that they need to cover on low tide, they can draw all of the enemies right into the basket very easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, especially in hazard level max, it is very important to strike a balance between how far you want to lure them because of how quickly everything spawns. But it appears they are letting this steelhead get closer, which is a very good idea, especially because they can take out multiple things in that area.
I love that bomb throw. That was pretty spot on, you know, And now, unfortunately, the Flingza does have to back off a little bit because Moz was able to target and come up. But following Moz to the basket is crucial, able to take it out and get a good amount of eggs into this. And that Steelhead, too. I think this is where the pressure is rising.
Yeah, absolutely. When the bosses spawn at the same rate, but you have more enemies to deal with. What we're seeing right here.
One member going down, too. Took a little while for them to get back up, so I think that might be to their detriment here. But they're still really close to quota. And honestly, with their 60-point lead, 50-point lead?
33, I believe it was.
Oh, 33? Okay. I think that's still really, really good.
I believe our prediction was a little bit off, but...
Yeah. So they're still doing a nice job of this balance that you were talking about. They've now hit the time level where they won't have any more bosses spawn, so it's a matter of collecting these eggs and staying alive from these kind of mini bosses, right?
But they actually, I believe we had 3 flyfish that were still present just now, and a stinger too, which made it a bit difficult. But they actually still managed to get 40 eggs out of that, which is very impressive.
They certainly did. They certainly did.
And it looks like we're just going to get another normal wave, so normal service has been resumed, I guess.
The normal wave might be pretty good for them because it can kind of balance out some of the other things that they could contend with.
Yeah, with these bosses spawning from the docks, that is the furthest they come from. But with this map.
I think this is a nice location for the basket, though, because they do have these platforms that they're able to get some height on them and get a couple of the bosses from there without really having to do much maneuvering throughout the map.
Yeah, absolutely. The height difference actually does very much help, especially when you can hang on that little high ground just where the basket is. You have a view of everything around.
You do. And I think there's a lot of good that's coming up from this, too. And so far, they're doing a great job dealing with this.
And MK Labs should actually just use a stingray there to take out the stinger, but I believe another one either might have spawned or wasn't able to take all of it out and goes down.
Yeah, this is going to be the hard part here because it took a while for them to come back up, and there's a lot of bosses now that are circling this basket. They're dealing with 2 Maws, I think.
They're dealing with 3 Maws, I believe.
3 Maws and Stingray, and they're running out of time, but they have a lot of eggs on the map, so if they can just stay alive and these Stingrays can back off a little bit, I think they'll be in good shape.
Yeah, unfortunately, they don't have time to deal with that stinger on the other side, as distracting as it is. But they do get 40, but they actually almost go down.
That was so close.
And they're only way 2, so they got another 100 seconds to go through.
They certainly do. I'm unclear in terms of what happens if, unfortunately, they don't outlive that next wave. I guess the score still gets added up.
I believe the score still gets added up, yes.
This is really to their benefit right now because this roller just sitting right here, as you mentioned earlier, can just mow down all of these enemies that come up.
Yeah, while the rest of the weapons are able to easily take down the Goldie. But one of them actually just went down, I believe, got pushed off the map.
Ooh, that is going to be the challenge because high tide here, you don't have a lot of room, and the water is actually a little higher than you might anticipate.
Absolutely.
Between these platforms.
And you don't have the luxury of using the wall that connects that high platform to the basket across. Mm-hmm. You do, but it is much smaller, which makes it more difficult to actually just jump from it and hang on the wall. Yeah, one of the big things in Glowflies is to hang on the wall so that your teammates can run eggs.
Ah.
But you can't do that for too long, or else they will jump up and try to hit you. Mm-hmm. But in high tide, you don't really have the luxury.
Yeah, it seems like it could be a little to their detriment, but we say that, and yet they're sitting pretty up here at almost 35 eggs with 30 seconds left. So they're just racking them up.
Yeah, they maybe slight difficulty to start the wave, but now they've very much got it under control.
Yeah, and they are just taking down these goldies one by one. I think this is going to be another 50 egg map for them, or 50 egg game for them.
Yeah, an inkjet has just been used, which should actually make sure that they get up to at least 50, and they do.
Nice, beautiful, and they still have a little bit of time, but I don't think they're going to have enough to get any more eggs in. So 52, amazing score for that. The Booyah's coming up. I love that the crowd is still cheering for their friends, even though they're people who hadn't had an opportunity to continue to play.
Yeah, 133. And one of them actually just clipped that, which
yeah,
very valid and
I would have
very much deserved to be clipped or captured.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth it. Really great job from them. On max difficulty, they've survived, and they played really, really well.
Despite that one small moment at the very end of Wave 2 where they only had one player up, they looked pretty comfortable.
They did. So I think they did great. We're just waiting for the last score to be tallied in, and we will see their total score and figure out what the other team was able to get from that round 3.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't get to see it on stream due to time constraints,
yeah.
But still want to know, of course.
Of course, we have to figure out who the winner is of, this fantastic Salmon Run tournament.
It was very nice to see these games in general. Just seeing what weapons people pick, seeing what strategies they use, seeing how they deal with the different maps,
yep.
and generally just seeing how much dedication they have to this mode is one of the greatest things to watch in general.
I agree.
At least for me.
For me too. I think it's really great, and I love being able to see how everything comes together. So it looks like they were able to maintain their lead, and 377 to 342.
So about 35 points, or 35 eggs is how much it was the difference. That's very impressive total, but
really nice job. And I love that everybody is cheering for them. Everyone is super excited. Somebody has a Salmon Run golden egg pillow. Do you see that?
Oh, I do see it.
That's so cute.
Yeah, even their opponents have the signs up in support of them too, which you love to see as well.
Absolutely. So it was so much fun to be able to watch them too, and I hope that all of you guys who joined us tonight had fun as well. So I'm really excited. I would love to be able to see this again. It was a great event to watch. So I think it was fun.
Yeah, I definitely think it was fun too. And it was also fun just trying to do my best to talk about different ways this mode can be played and things people might not know about as well.
I think you did a great job, super prepared. Thank you so much, Drift, for joining us tonight. Thank all of you for joining us, and we will see you bright and early tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time to kick off day 2 at G7 for Splatoon. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your night.